Well, as you know, or many of you know, we are entering this new series called Shattered, Finding Hope in Suffering. Because who doesn't want to come out of Easter, right? Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Now let's talk about your suffering. Right? We don't want to necessarily go there, but the reality is that there are a lot of people that are suffering today. Wouldn't you agree? A lot of people that are hurting and trying to get hope within the midst of the resurrection message. And when we look at even the definition of suffering, we see this, that suffering is the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. And if you go and you look in the dictionary, there's actually a picture that shows what suffering looks like. Now, some of you are laughing, but some of you know, like that picture on the right, and it brings you to a state of mourning instantly, right? What is that picture of? Gary Anderson's field goal, right? It hadn't missed all year. All year. We're still talking about it, right? Like 2 million people claim to be Viking fans. That is 2 million people joined together in suffering. Long-standing suffering. You ever notice about suffering? Like, suffering's not a quick thing. Like, you go through it, it's not a quick answer, or I just need to hear this, and we go through it. It is a long process. And so you think about this, as we're doing some research, one of the things I wanted to do was to get a little picture, what does it look like in this day? How many people at a time are going through suffering? And it's just really hard to figure that out. But when we look at some of the statistics that are out there, we see this, that 19% of adults suffer with anxiety. 29% are diagnosed with depression. 16.7% suffer from some type of addiction. 21% of people suffer from chronic pain. 17 million people are living with cancer. 12.5 million people suffer with major loss. And that's just for the adults. Imagine you bring kids into the mix of it and how much that could be. I mean, that's just America. That's not even worldwide. You think about how many people must be going through really hard things every day, how to try to go through those things and to try to get comfort. And one of the things that's really important to know, like when we talk about suffering, some of you might say, well, I suffer every Sunday when I come and I listen to Pastor Derek and Pastor Joe preach. And I'm telling you, that doesn't fit the definition of suffering. Stop saying that. We all have different elements of suffering. And that's not even talking about, all those things, that's not even talking about relational suffering. Some of you are in relational elements of suffering, or employment suffering, or your medical suffering. There's all kinds of things that are going on in the world today. And I love this, when we're getting in this story of Job, Job's life is a life of suffering. And we're going to kind of dissect it and go through it in the next 6 weeks. And like Job's life and suffering, it's going to take a little bit to unfold. Like, you might want answers today, but there's answers you're going to have to wait for in this series as we unveil some things. But most people come down to this one question. They want to know, well, why does God allow suffering? Anyone have that question before? Sometimes you'll hear the question, why does God let good people suffer? Now, there's a lot to unpack there. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. If that is your question in this series and you want to know why does God allow suffering, here's a spoiler. It doesn't tell you in this book. It doesn't give you the reason of why Job is in suffering. It's not what it talks about or addresses. And so if that is what you're hoping to get out of this series, you're just going to be disappointed. But what happens is through Job and his wife and his 4 friends that come into this, they're really kind of dealing with 2 questions. The first question is this: is God just? Do we have a just God? And does he run the world according to that justice? Now, those are big questions, right? Really big questions that deserve some time with that. By the way, Natalie did such a great children's message in that. It was so good, right? How many of you have heard that phrase in your household? It's not fair, right? Yeah, and let's be honest. How many of you have said that in your life? Most of us, right? It's just not fair. Oh, I hate that saying. I hate it. And I don't know about you, but as a parent, there's kind of two approaches that I want to do. One of them is this. I want to give them a little bit of sense of saying, oh, let me show you what's fair. And you ever feel that way a little bit? You think it's not fair because you didn't have as many blocks. Well, I'm going to take your blocks, go get a job, and buy your own blocks. You ever feel that? Right? You think your life is unfair. Let me show you what's unfair. Sometimes it's easy to respond like that. Or my favorite one is just fact. Well, life isn't fair. Get used to it. And we don't like to think that, right? We would like to think that everything is just, that everything is fair, but it's just not fair. Look at the world and the way that we are. I mean, most of us have been given privileges and resources that most of the world just doesn't have. And so think about this. I know there's a bunch of us that are running a marathon. The reason why is because there are kids who spend all day, elementary kids, all day getting water. It's all they do. Can't go to school. They just to survive because of where they were born. Like where you're born matters. Like you have more resources in some places than other places all day. We know because of skin color, it's different for people. They have different experiences depending on where you're at. It changes things. Is that just? Is that fair? No. What about gender? You think about this. There are places that if you're a woman, you cannot get an education. Well, that's not fair. The world doesn't operate in a sense of fairness across the world. And we all kind of want to think that it does. We like to think that everyone's got a fair shot, but it's not the way things work. Tim Keller says this in his quote. He says, if you have money, power, and status today, it is due to the century and place in which you were born, to your talents and capacities and health, none of which you earned. In short, all your resources are, in the end, a gift of God. I mean, think about that. Like, even when you were born gives you different advantages or disadvantages. I mean, some of you went through the Great Depression. That was very difficult. The resources that were available back then are so much different than the resources that are here now. We talk about like interest rate. Well, the interest rate's just not fair. Don't talk to the people in the Great Depression about interest rates. It just changes wherever you kind of come into the story. And I'm telling you, one of the things that I love is that when we get an opportunity to walk with people who just have so much less. Because it gives us a really good example that not everyone's on the same spot. So, for example, we are walking with, if you don't know this, with an organization called Care Portal. And Care Portal is an organization that walks with people in fostering families and those who sometimes are coming from different countries that just don't have the resources in this community. And wouldn't you say, it is not cheap to live here? I thought that would be an amen moment. Okay, I forgot. We're in Lutheran Church here a little bit. So, I mean, it's not cheap to live here. So you can imagine people with very little resources coming into how hard that is. And when we start to think about the different stories of the families we're walking with, for example, we have one family that we're walking with right now that's here from Haiti. And they're in a political asylum from Haiti. And if you've been paying attention, Haiti's a mess. It is violent, and it's angry. I mean, gangs are taking over, and resources that are being brought there are being taken from those who have a lot and not given to those who need it the most. It is hard, and so they made the choice to come here and to give it all up for a better life. And we get a chance to walk with this family. There's another family that we get to walk with, and oh man, it just breaks your heart. Here's a mom who just wants a better life for her kids. I mean, so much of us want that, right? We just want to make it better for the generation to come. And she, every time that we have a group that goes over there and talks with her, she's just in tears of gratitude and thanksgiving that we are able to step into the gap, that resource gap, and help provide for them. And so she has said, when she was 14, she was kicked out of her house. She's been on her own since 14, trying to navigate the complexity of the world that we live in here today. And all she wants to do is to give her kids a shot. And I love it. She's so grateful. She's so grateful that she's got people that come beside her and love her and try to fill in some of that gap. We have another family who has kids, and it breaks their parents' hearts that every day their kids come home and they're bullied from school. And the reason they're bullied is because they just don't have nice enough clothes. They don't have a new outfit every day. They are given so little. And it's not the trendy and the fashion that sometimes this area desires. And so they're getting picked on and they're getting bullied. And their school experience is miserable for them. And so we were able to come and bring clothes to them. And she's just thanking you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We are so grateful. Life isn't always fair. And so we think about this. Not everybody gets to start at go, right? Think about the game of Monopoly. Not everyone is on. I mean, that would be kind of the way to go, right? Like everyone gets to start on go, and they all get to roll the dice and see kind of what happens from there, right? That would be the right way to do that. But if we're honest, we really don't want that. Right? For so many of us, we have had a chance to start life further ahead, right? We're not on go. We're on the other side of the board and into saying, well, I think God should be just. Well, not in my situation, but for everybody else, right? Like, we don't want to all start on go. We would have to give up a lot of things in our lives to start on go from the very beginning. And so we get this context of going, okay, well, God, how can you be just, but yet I don't always want you to be just? And you can see the complexion in this question. And as we kind of go into this whole thing of Job, we're going to unveil or go into those two questions through the story of Job. And I want to take a step back when we start talking about Job. And so here's a couple different things that are going on. And it really starts this way. So in the beginning, Annette, by the way, great job of reading. Holy cow, there was a lot of verses. Right? We told Annette we probably should take an intermission about halfway through that reading because it's so long, right? But it's a good setup of the story. And so in this story, you think about it like a trial. And so you've got God as the judge, and you have Satan as the accuser coming in, accusing God of some things. And we know in this story that Satan was kind of going around the world and seeing different things. And he's saying, well, God, the deck is stacked. He's accusing God of some things. He's saying, hey, well, the deck is stacked. And it's not fair for everybody. And so in the midst of this, he comes back to God, and God does this. And this is one of those things in the story that's so hard for so many of us. In the story, he comes and he says this. God actually comes to Satan and says, well, have you considered Job? Have you considered Job? And he said, well, because Job is blameless, he's righteous, and he honors God, and he resists evil. You see, Satan doesn't come and saying, well, what about Job? God actually says, Job, have you considered him? And a lot of us don't like to think that. Like, why did you pick Job? I'm guessing Job is up there. Well, why'd you pick me? What about my neighbor? Pick him. He has this great life. And God is just saying, oh my gosh, look at my servant Job and who he is. And he's very righteous. And what does the accuser do? The accuser does what the accuser does. Is he says, well, of course he is honoring you. Of course he's resisting evil because his life is pretty good. It's pretty awesome. And so God does something. He says, all right, if you think that's it. I mean, he's righteous. And so here's what I'm going to allow you to do. I'm going to allow you to create some suffering in his life. And he comes back in this, and he says, Satan, I'm going to allow you to do some things in his life. And he gives him this one boundary. He says this, you can do whatever you want, but you can't physically harm him. At this point, okay, there's more in the story, but at this point, you can't physically harm him. All right, let's see what happens. And that's kind of what happens. So what does Satan do? He gets right at it. He gets right at it. And so you kind of get this sense in this next verse is he has a day. Imagine this, like you wake up and you have it all and your life is really good. And some of you have had that moment in your life and all of a sudden it has changed. A piece of news or something happened, and what you thought you knew, all of a sudden someone's going, this loved one that you have has died, or you have cancer, or whatever that piece is that you've been laid off, whatever that piece of information is, your life changed. Imagine this for Job. In this moment, everything was really good. All of a sudden, a servant comes in and says, hey, Job, your oxen, donkey, and farmhands are gone. And before he's done with that, there's a second servant that comes in. Oh, hey, by the way, your sheep and your shepherds gone. And before he's done, another person comes in and says, your camel servants are gone. And before he's done, another person comes in and says, your sons and daughters are gone. And there are a couple things that we just realize. One of them is this. You notice this in Satan? He takes everything that he's allowed. He doesn't say, I'm going to take most of it and kind of I'm going to weight him into this. He just says, I'm taking it all right now. Today, it's gone. I'm taking him from happy to sadness instantly. And isn't that what the accuser does? He wants to do everything he can. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And he will go as far to that boundary as he possibly can. And then what does he do? He spends the rest of the story trying to get Job and his friends to blame God for what just happened. Isn't it? He's sneaky. He's sneaky. He doesn't take personal responsibility for what's going on, but that's what he does. And that's not fair. I mean, a lot of times we say that that's just not fair. God, why would you allow that? That doesn't seem like justice at all in this story. Now, a couple things I love this about Job's story in particular is, can you imagine how would you react in the midst of that, of a day like that? I mean, that's devastating, isn't it? And some of you, that brings back some memories of that first moment where whatever you are working through or suffering through, when you first heard, that's a painful moment. And I think in the midst, I'm so struck by the way Job reacts. In fact, if I'm honest, convicted. And so what does Job do in the midst of this? He comes back and he says this. He said, naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Can you imagine that? You lost everything. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all of this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. In the midst of it, he didn't say, God, why me? God, what are you doing? God, are you just? God, how do you act in that justice? He just, in this moment, he just praised God for who he was, and he worshiped. And I love next week, Pastor Joe is going to go deeper into that, of what it looks like to be in that moment. But I can't imagine. That's not my first response usually when I hear awful news. And the other thing that I think is fascinating about this very moment is this. And sometimes Job gets this thing, we get a picture of him going, oh my gosh, he is this amazing person. This is just where he's at now. We're going to see that throughout the story as he goes deeper into suffering, as he goes longer into it, there are some things that are going to change in his life, and there's some different things he's going to say later on that we will get to into week 4, 5, and 6. But in this moment, he just says, God, you've given me everything. You could take everything. I'm just grateful for who you are in my life. And so as we go through the story, we're going to see 6 different people who are going to speak into the story. Job, his wife, and 4 other people that come alongside him. And as he does this, every one of them has a different reason and a different answer for those 2 questions. Is God just, and does he act in accordance to his justice? And everyone has a different theory. And so we're gonna have a little bit of fun in this series, kind of going through and dissecting that and to see what that's all about. And some of you are like, whoa. I want an answer today. I don't want to wait 6 weeks to find out the end of the story. Well, guess what? You don't jump to the last chapter of the book. You got to kind of go through this. You got to kind of see how it develops and what it's like. It is suffering, right? You don't just get to the end of it. It takes time to go through this. And so a couple things I want to encourage you to do is, first of all, I know that some of you got some really big challenges in your life. Some big challenges. I mean, challenges to the point you're like, it's not fair. My circumstance is not fair. Why do I have cancer and others don't? Why can I not find a job and many can? Whatever your situation is, you might be sitting there with pain and anger, and you want some answers now. I get it. Maybe you're asking, God, where are you in the midst of all of this? Why did you allow this to go on? And there's three things I want to encourage you to do if that's where you're at. One of them is this. I want you to read a chapter a day. Actually, I want us all to read a chapter a day of Job. Start today with chapter 1, then go to chapter 2, 3, 4, all through the series. We're going to go through this whole book in the next 6 weeks. So that's part of it. Be into His Word and see how the story unveils. Secondly, start to journal with God. I love to call that prayer. It's just saying, okay, God, here's my situation. I know you're in the midst of this. Let's just have a dialogue back and forth. And just start journaling with Him about your feelings, your hurts, your frustrations. That's what I love about Job. Like it's that in the Psalms, it is a full-on book of your deepest feelings. God says, I'm big enough to handle whatever you've got. What the deepest hurts that you've got, bring them to me. Your deepest anger, bring them to me. I'm bigger than that. I can handle it. Start to dialogue with Him. And the other thing is this, start to battle with other people. You see, I think that's the thing about suffering so many times is we suffer alone. We don't want to bring it on other people. We don't want to deflate them. And so we just sit in our own lazy boy. And the reality is we were never meant to suffer alone. We were always meant to be with other people. You were at the very beginning, there was just Adam. It was Adam and God said it's not good for man to be alone. He needs a helper to come alongside him to live life together. And if you're suffering alone, you need someone to come by you, to help you, to work through things together. And I am so grateful in my life that God has placed people in my life to battle with me with whatever is going on in my life, and that I could battle with them with whatever is going on in their life. Battle with other people in the midst of your suffering. And maybe today, like you need to start that battle today. And if that's where you're at, I'm just telling you, I want to encourage you at the end of this service, we're going to have people that are going to be up here to pray and to battle with you up here and on that side. And if you've got something going on and you just need it, come up and let them battle for you. Let them pray over it. Let them remind them of God's goodness and grace and love and care in your life. He hasn't abandoned you. He hasn't forsaken you. He's in the midst of it with you. Come up. And I'm telling you, I know the accuser is in your ear saying, no, don't do this. Keep this to yourself. You don't want to tell everyone else. I mean, imagine what they're going to think and something like that. That's the accuser talking to. God is up here saying, no, bring it to me. Bring it to me. And our prayer team are ready to battle with you. I want to encourage you to do that. And so, Heavenly Father, I just pray, Lord, as we enter this series, and as we look at Job and how you are speaking through this, Lord, I pray that you bring your presence into the life of people, especially who are really going through hard stuff. God, would you speak to them wherever they're at? We know, Lord, this world is broken. We know that this world isn't fair. But God, keep our eyes on you. Keep our eyes on you. And I pray for anyone, Lord, that is suffering alone. Lord, would you lift someone up in their life to walk with them? We ask this all in your holy name. And all God's people said.